Revelation 13. We looked at the first 6 verses last week, and now we want to finish this off. I don't know what happened to notes. It went a bit wonky, and we ended up printing 10 pages instead of 8. But there's plenty of pictures for you to look at. So Revelation 13. Let's pick up at verse 7. And then we'll go to the end of the chapter. Everybody found it? Verse 7 says, "And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity, and he that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword, and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. And that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark of the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Amen. God will bless the reading of his word. Now, this last verse gets people very excited. In fact, the last 2 verses is of Revelation 13 about the mark of the beast, and this number 666. Well, we'll talk about it in a moment. One thing we can say is that all the predictions about who this man is have all been wrong, because the man has come and gone. I remember not long ago, someone was predicting that the man 666 was Barack Hussein Obama. Okay, well, he's almost gone. He's only another month and a half or so left. So it just shows the foolishness of making these predictions, trying to identify this man carrying the name 666, or the number 666. Now, we learned last time that the Antichrist will come, arise out of the sea. He'll be inspired and empowered by the devil, and he will initially fool people into thinking that he has died and been resurrected. We saw that in Revelation 13, verse 3. And the Bible makes clear that initially he will come like a friend. And he will use flattery. You'll find that in the book of Daniel. He will be deceptive. Now, that shouldn't surprise us, because the Antichrist is empowered and possessed by the devil himself. And the devil is a master of lies, isn't he? He's a master deceiver. You can't get a more deceptive creature than the devil. So the devil is controlling this beast, the Antichrist, and it's no surprise that the Antichrist is a most amazing deceiver of humanity. Now, the Antichrist will be a man who will construct a world empire in a very short space of time. Now, we haven't had a man to build an empire for many, many, many centuries in this world. The British Empire was the last great empire. that ruled the world. But that took many, many decades to construct, didn't it? And it was constructed by many different people in different parts of the world. The Antichrist will do this in a few years, just a few years. And he won't just control the area that the British controlled, he'll control the whole world. Now that's impressive. This is going to be a very clever, ruthless, calculating individual. And he will deceive a lot of people. And after he deceives people, there'll still be a group that will not be easily deceived, even non-believers. So how is he going to deal with them? Well, we're told he's also going to be a man of intimidation. He's going to be a man of bloodshed. Get my English right there. And when I was reading this, I can see so much the parallels with Adolf Hitler. Do you remember how Hitler came to power in Germany? If you don't understand it, go and read it. It's worth reflecting on. Hitler came very slowly, very almost surreptitiously. He was treated as a very insignificant, a lunatic fringe figure in Germany. And it was only after he worked his way in, and his party were not, a very large party, the Nazi party. It was only when he got into power and deceived the people to get into power that he then turned on the people with the Nazi regime and began to destroy all his enemies, the communists and other rival factions. And then, of course, he turned on the Jews and began to invade all these other countries. But initially, he wasn't like that, Hitler. He didn't say he was going to do all of those things. He pretended he was there just to make Germany great again. Sounds a bit familiar, doesn't it? That's all he wanted to do. Make Germany great again. Recover their national pride. And he did. But once he got in, he didn't stop. And then revealed, we have an expression in English, the iron fist inside the velvet glove. You understand the expression? When the glove comes off, then you see the iron fist. And that's what Hitler was like. And you also see the parallel with Hitler, that he was trying to build a greater Germany, an empire. You also see with Hitler the parallel with the Antichrist, that he hated the Jews. He tried to destroy the Jews, just the way the Antichrist will also eventually try to destroy the Jews. So there are some parallels. Not all parallels are perfect, but you will find a lot of parallels with the rise of Hitler. You also will discover with Adolf Hitler that this guy was a great speaker in public. He could move tens of thousands of people at the Nuremberg rallies. He could gather 20, 30,000 people, and he would have all the flags, and he'd have the soldiers and the military and the order, and it would really impress people. Because remember, Germany just came out of the First World War. They were poor, they were downtrodden, they were feeling very despondent about themselves as a nation. And suddenly this guy came along with energy and fervor and promised to make them a great nation again and restore their national pride. And they were really caught up. And initially, they treated Hitler with awe. They were, wow, this guy's good. This guy's impressive. He solved the unemployment of Germany. He started to provide things like the Volkswagen car for the common people to be able to have a vehicle for themselves. I explained to you last week, the word Volkswagen is Volk, German, ordinary, means really ordinary. Wagon, car. And the Antichrist will be seen. He will come with awe. But the awe will then turn to worship. Now, the Antichrist initially will accept just respect, just reverence. He will tolerate all religions. But in the middle of the tribulation period, it will then become an exclusive worship. You'll move from awe to worship. He has to be treated like a god. And by the end of the tribulation period, he will demand that you only worship him. Okay? That's what the Bible reveals about this. It will come in process, in stages. Now, the group of people that he will particularly target will be the old enemy of the devil, the Jews. Again, initially he will not turn on the Jews. Initially, he will make friends with the Jews. Initially, he will flatter the Jews. He will deceive the Jews. Initially, he will allow them to have their temple on the Temple Mount. The Bible makes that clear. Initially, he will solve the unsolvable enigma between the Jew and the Arab. He will appear to have solved that puzzle. I noticed recently Mr. Trump said one of the things he wants to have a go at is to solve the world's biggest conflict, the longest running conflict, that between the Jew and the Arab. I don't think he'll be able to solve it. In fact, I know he won't be able to solve it. But the Antichrist will. He will get the Jew and the Arab to agree a truce, a peace agreement, to allow the Jews to use the Temple Mount. It's going to be part of his strategy. So initially he will come to the Jews as a friend. But in the middle of the tribulation period, 3.5 years in, he will reject the Jewish people and their God. And he will sit in the temple, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 says, and declare himself as God. And the Jews at this stage begin to waken up, many of them. This guy's not the Messiah. This is a false Messiah. And then the Antichrist will launch this terrible persecution against the Jews in the middle of the Great Tribulation, or the middle of the tribulation period. And that period, the last 3.5 years, if you remember, the whole period is called the tribulation period. The last period is called what? Great Tribulation period. Those are not my words, those are the words of Jesus Christ, Matthew 24. Then shall there be great tribulation. Okay? Unprecedented tribulation, Christ says. 2/3 of the Jews will die in this period. In that second Holocaust and greater Holocaust that the Antichrist will launch. Now, Revelation 13 verse 7, when we look at verse 5 and 6, this is the period that is kicking off. He's now revealing himself to be God. In the middle of this, the Antichrist, this tribulation period. He's now declaring himself to be the object of worship. And what happens? He blasphemes God, and then verse 7 says, and it was given unto him to make war with the saints. So here he launches openly the second Holocaust against the Jews and against those who reject his rule. At this point onwards. And it says he was able to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. So at this point, to this point, somewhere along this 3.5 years, he builds this empire of nations, kindreds, tongues, languages, probably going from east to west, north to south. The Antichrist will be ruling the world at this time. And Daniel 11:38 tells us he honors the God of forces. The Antichrist is a person who knows that what the ungodly fear more than anything else is what? Bloodshed. That's what people fear, unsaved people fear. Do you remember in the book of Job, when the devil appeared before the Lord, in Job chapter 1, he said to the Lord, skin for skin. Well, let's turn to it, so just so you see this. And Satan was right in his observation, in a general sense. In Job chapter 1, well, Job chapter 2 it is actually, verse 4. Job chapter 1 is the first conversation. Job chapter 2 is the second conversation. And Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin, yea, all that a man hath will he give for his life. Okay? Was the devil wrong in that observation? No, that's generally true. The devil knows that. Most people will betray their principles. Most people will give up their money, will even give up their family in order to preserve their own life, especially the ungodly person. Most people are selfish at heart. If you put them like old Nebuchadnezzar did, if you don't bow down, you're going into the burning fiery furnace. Most people will bow down. Satan knows that. And the Antichrist, of course, is inspired by the devil, empowered, possessed by the devil. He will be fully aware that intimidation, and especially the fear of death, most people will capitulate. Even countries like China and Russia and Vietnam, which are very proud of their independence and very proud of their sovereignty and very proud that they cannot be subjugated, countries like Thailand as well, when they face the power of the Antichrist, if you do not conform, I will destroy your nation, I will destroy your family, I will destroy your life. Most people will give in at that point. And it's very impressive what the Antichrist does. He does this in just a few short months. He conquers the whole world. Now remember, all these judgments have been going on during the tribulation period, you remember? All the famine and the earthquakes and all these signs in the heaven and all this turmoil, and thousands of people have died from plague. So there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of fear. Governments can't control their nations anymore. Governments can't take care of their nations anymore. So up comes the Antichrist and he says, I can do it. And a lot of people are saying, you know, this guy might be the answer. Because there's no answer here in the politicians. There's no answers in the business world. There's no answers in the scientific world how to solve this problem. And the Antichrist will guile and persuade people. And those who don't believe in him, he'll threaten them with destruction and their lives. Now, all that dwell on the earth, verse 8, Revelation 13, shall worship him. Okay? Now, I am sure the Antichrist will have access to all the great weapons of war. Biological weapons, nuclear weapons. Okay? I'm sure he'll have all those as threats against nations that refuse to submit to him. And the thing that he will ask for is not just to be respected, not just to be their ruler. He will want them to worship him. He will bring in this spiritual dimension. And we're told all the world will worship him. Those whose names were not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Now, we know that during this period when he demands worship from the whole world, there will be people who are believers. Remember, there are 144,000 Jews. You remember? We know that there are Gentiles who are converted. We've already read this in Revelation 1 through to Revelation 13. We've already come across. There's two witnesses as well. There's these two witnesses that the Antichrist will kill, and their followers, their disciples. So there is a significant remnant of people who will not submit, who will not give up their faith, who will not give in. They are like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. What did they say? Turn or burn? They say, we burn. But we're not turning. We won't bow down, Nebuchadnezzar, to your image. We won't bow down to your God. There will be people like that, including all of these and others. And what's the advice for those people? Well, here's the advice given to us. Verse 10 of Revelation 13. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. This is what God says. If you're one of those who's imprisoned because you refuse to worship the Antichrist, go to the prison. And he that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Accept it. If you're going to die, accept it. Here is the patience and faith of the saints. This is part of your testimony. That's what it says there. That's what it means. Here is the patience and faith of the saints. If you're a child of God and you are threatened with death or imprisonment or loss of your home or your family because you worship the Lord Jesus Christ and you refuse to worship the Antichrist, God's advice is what? Accept it. Accept that's the will of providence. Do you remember Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? When old Nebuchadnezzar said to them, I'm going to give you one more chance. I'm going to play the music again. Maybe you didn't hear right. You know? I'll play it again, then you'll get a chance to bow down. And they all said what? Hey, Neb, you can shut down the music. We don't need it because we're not going to bow down. whether we live or die. Now, they didn't say it rude. They weren't disrespectful. And then when the men came and seized them, they didn't fight them. They didn't pull out a sword and try to save their lives. No, they allowed themselves to be taken, like Daniel allowed himself to be taken and thrown into the lion's den. They allowed themselves to be taken and thrown into the burning fiery furnace. That's the spirit of this verse. It's saying, as a believer, we have to walk in the footsteps of Christ. What was Christ's footsteps? To allow yourself to be persecuted for your faith. To allow yourself even to be put to death for your faith. And God's advice to those in the tribulation period is, yes, accept it. If you find yourself in circumstances where you're imprisoned or even have to die for your faith, just accept it. Do it well. Die well. Die magnificently for the glory of God. Now, I must pause at this point. Because, of course, that doesn't really fit well with the health and wealth prosperity gospel, does it? Because that's the very opposite of what they teach. But I must stop and look at this word deliverance. Because there are some people, and they think that when God came down and delivered Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from the burning fiery furnace, that was a special deliverance. But whereas Stephen was stoned to death. Do you remember in Acts chapter 7? They say, oh, not so good, huh? I'd rather have the one, the burning fiery furnace come out of it. Maybe Stephen's not just as good a believer. No. Stephen had just as much a deliverance by God as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had when they were saved from the burning fiery furnace. Why? Because you remember what happened to Stephen when he was dying? He looked up, the Bible says, and who did he see? Jesus at the right hand of the Father, standing up to what? Receive him. He wasn't destroyed. He was going to where? To glory. In fact, if you had asked Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Stephen had said, now, which one would you rather be? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego says, I'll go with him straight to heaven. Because that's the better deliverance. That's the greater deliverance. So don't get it into your head that death is somehow inferior to deliverance from martyrdom. It's not. It's actually the better thing. Remember what Paul said? For me to live is Christ, but to die is gain. Gain. That's better. Because I gain eternal rest, eternal joy, eternal peace, eternal deliverance. Now, the tribulation saints are enjoying the fellowship of the sufferings of Christ. But then in verse 11, we've talked a lot about the Antichrist. And I suspect if I was to do a survey in this room, most people here have heard about the Antichrist. Yeah? Before we ever studied the book of Revelation. But most people here have not heard that there's another person called the false prophet. We don't recognize that there are three persons involved in this trinity of evil in the book of Revelation in the end times. There's the red dragon devil. There's the Antichrist beast, Revelation 13 verse 1. But in Revelation 13 verse 11, we're told another beast. This word another is the Greek word allos, where we get our word alloy. You know, in metals, metallurgy and chemistry, talk about alloys. It means, let me give you a simple way of explaining it. And I'm stealing this one from Dr. Paul Chu, okay? It's not mine. If I have a Mercedes-Benz car, I don't think anybody here has a Mercedes-Benz car, so I can use that one. It's a very expensive car, top of the range. And I crash my car. And I call the insurers and I say, I've crashed my car, I need another car. They say, oh, don't worry, we'll give you a car. I'll have it at your house this afternoon, a replacement vehicle. and the insurance company turns up at your house that afternoon and gives you a 10-year-old Toyota, that the exhaust is falling off it, that it's rusty, hasn't been cleaned, you'd say, what? Huh? I thought I was getting a car the same as the one that I've just crashed. They said, no, but the insurance says a car, a replacement car. It doesn't say what type. But if the insurance company brought a different car to you, identical to the car that you lost, that would be an allos car, one of the same kind. Okay? Because there are two Greek words, heteros, we get our word heterosexual, means one of a different kind. Excuse my bad writing, okay? So if you had a Mercedes, brand new, crashed it and got this old Toyota, that would be a heteros car, one of a different kind. But if you crashed your brand new Mercedes and they give you a replacement car of a brand new Mercedes, that would be a allos, one of the same kind. And the Greek word here to describe the false prophet is an allos beast, one of the same kind. He may look different, but his essential characteristics, his character, who he's controlled by, his agenda, his purpose is the same as the Antichrist. He's like the Antichrist with a different face. That's the point. Okay? So who is this false prophet? Now, notice the description of him is different. We're told he exercises all the power of the first beast. So he has the same area that he generally works within, an authority. But he's different because it says in verse 11, this one came out of the earth. So this seems to be more of a human side to him, less of a demonic side on the surface. And he had two horns like a lamb. Now, the word that's translated lamb here actually fits nicely with our English. It's what we call the diminutive form of the word for sheep. So it has the idea of little lamb. I don't know if you've been to a farm before. If you go to a farm and they have sheep, most people look at the sheep and they go, oh, okay. And then the little lambs come out and everybody goes, so cute, don't it? So harmless. And all the silly children say to their parents, can I have one of these at home? Because what do we see when we see a lamb? We see something that's not threatening, don't we? We see something that looks cute, harmless. Something that's almost cuddly. Now, nobody takes home a sheep. Have you ever heard of people say, I'm taking home this big ram, you know? No, nobody sees sheep like this. But everybody looks at a lamb and, it's a very different feeling. And it's that diminutive form of the Greek word for sheep, the lamb, little lamb. This is what the Antichrist is coming across as, like a little lamb. Sorry, the false prophet is like a little lamb. Now compare that with Revelation 13, verse 2. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. Nobody brings a leopard home for a pet, do they? And his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. This Antichrist beast, there's nothing cuddly about him. There's nothing friendly about him when he's really seen in his true colors. Now, I know he tries to pretend he's a friend to some people, but he hasn't got this soft side to him, the Antichrist, does he? But this false prophet, he kind of makes up for that deficiency in the Antichrist. Because the false prophet, he is going to look like a little lamb. He'll come across. It doesn't mean that he comes in, with a white and a little fluffy tail. No. It means that he comes across as harmless, as pious, as your friend, as a nice guy. Now, it's not hard to think of a few religious leaders like that, is it? We've got a few of them in the world today who go around pretending to be very holy, and sympathetic and friendly and loving. And we've had them down through the centuries. And this false prophet, he is going to help the Antichrist because his role is to promote, first of all, the Antichrist. That's what he's going to do. He's going to promote the Antichrist. Because there's going to be a lot of people saying, I don't know about this Antichrist guy. They won't call him the Antichrist, of course. I don't know about this guy. He's a bit aggressive, or he sounds a bit like a demagogue. He sounds someone that it's either his way or the highway. Whereas the false prophet is going to come along and say, this is the man we need. He's a man of vision. We're a people in a terrible situation. The world's desperate. And I know this man. He's a good man. He cares about people. He loves people. I'm tempted to suggest who that might be today, but I won't. So he has a religious role. Now, you're going to have these two areas. You have the religious side, and then you have the Antichrist. He's going to be in the military, economic side, politics. So you have the Antichrist here. You have the false prophet working in this sphere. And the false prophet is appearing to be in the religious side, but he's also trying to use his religious position, his religious influence to promote this guy, the Antichrist. And these are going to be terrible twins, the Antichrist and the false prophet. They will work together with all the power of hell behind them. Notice what it says about the false prophet in verse 11. He had two horns like a lamb, like a little lamb. But then it says, and he spake as a dragon. Now that doesn't mean that when he opens his mouth all the fire will come out. That's not what it's saying. It means that he has the same guile and craft and lying, deceptive tongue as the old dragon, the devil. That's what it was saying. He's empowered by the same source, the devil. That's all. But he looks like a lamb. He looks like a friend. He looks very pious. He looks like someone you could trust. And what I think will help the false prophet in his deception is that he's not seeking personal glory. Remember this. Who's he trying to promote? Someone else. People are often fooled by that. If you want to fool people, the way you do it is, I don't mean this in a facetious way, is to pretend you're not seeking your own interest, but someone else's interest. And then more people will buy into you and say, oh yeah, so yeah, they're very sincere, He just wants the best for this other person or this country or this situation. And who was the greatest deceiver at pretending he was acting on the other person's interest? Who was the first one to do this? Genesis chapter 3. Who was it? The soul serpent. And didn't he come along? And he said to Eve, Eve, we're friends, Eve. We're not hostile. And he said to Eve, is God, let's go to Genesis 3, just look at what he said. It's very interesting. He asked her first, yea, hath God said, ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman began this conversation. And she says, ye shall not eat of it. God has said, ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. Which, of course, God hadn't said. And the serpent said unto the woman, ye shall not surely die. And then he adds the poison, verse 5. For God doth know. Oh, God knows something that he's not telling you, Eve. I'm on your side, Eve. I want to tell you something that God's hiding from you. I'm acting on your interest, Eve. God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. In other words, Satan came along and he said, Eve, I'm not acting for my interest. I'm on your side, Eve. You see that? He tried to drive a wedge between Eve and God. And he tried to pretend that he was on Eve's side. He tried to pretend that he was there to empower Eve, to give Eve independence from God, that Eve could live her own life without God's word. That in fact God was jealous of her, that God wanted to harm her, and that if she just trusted what he said, she could have freedom and liberty. And the devil's telling the same old lie today, isn't he? He's going around telling people, if you just throw out religion, if you just stop following what your parents believe or the church believes, you can have freedom. You won't be constrained by all these rules. You'll feel so much better. Now, the Antichrist and the false prophet, wow, they're going to be masters of deception. Masters of deception. There are people who think, well, I don't see how they could do it. I don't see how in a few short months and years this could all be turned around. I tell you, Germany turned around within a few months. Less than a year, 18 months. Hitler turned Germany around to worshipping him. China did it with Mao Zedong in just a very short time, controlling 1 billion people. Intimidation. Those who wouldn't follow were intimidated to follow. If you want to see people worship, you go to many of these countries today. You go to North Korea, you see what they do. They're up there and they told the great leader has died, and what they do, and they're weeping, and the whole tens of thousands of them are swept up in the hysteria. The Antichrist will do it. No problem. And with this false prophet using the religious influence he has to promote the Antichrist, he'll have the complete package, won't he? He'll be the military expert, he'll be the economic expert, he'll be the religious expert, leader, guru. He'll have all these qualities. Now, what does the false prophet do? It says, verse 12, and he exercises all the power of the first beast, so the Antichrist, before him, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. So this false prophet is going to promote the Antichrist as the one who had a deadly wound and was, what? Resurrected from the deadly wound. Now, we talked about this last week. What is the Antichrist trying to do with this? What's he trying to pretend he is? The Messiah. Because Isaiah 53, Psalm 22, and all these other Old Testament prophecies tell us that the Messiah will die and be resurrected. The Messiah will be lay in the tomb. Isaiah 53 tells us that. So the false prophet will be able to come to the Jews, indeed many other people, and say, this guy, the Antichrist, he died. He rose again. He's the real Messiah. Psalm 22, he fulfilled it. Isaiah 53, he fulfilled it. Now, that won't work for everybody, of course, because not everybody will be Jewish and not everybody will be impressed by that, but a lot of people will be very impressed. Remember this, the Antichrist and the false prophet, they have many strings in their, or many arrows in their bows, strings to their bow. Got the wrong metaphor here. They can use different things to fool different people. Now, he not only promotes the Antichrist as being the Messiah, the one who's been raised from the dead. Verse 13, and he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. So, here we're given, this is very interesting, because you have to know your Bible to understand what's going on here. Because what's going on here is linked to the Old Testament and also linked to the other chapters in the book of Revelation. The false prophet can send fire down from heaven in the sight of all men. Now, can you name me people in the Bible who God sent fire from heaven in their ministries in the sight of men? Well, the obvious one is Elijah. Any more? There was Moses, remember? Those who opposed Moses, God sent fire down from heaven to destroy them. So there's the two main ones. Okay? Elijah and Moses. Okay? Now, some of you were in the synagogue just 2 weeks ago. And in the corner of the synagogue, there's a fancy chair. What's it called? Elijah's chair. Now, why is it called Elijah's chair? Unfortunately, our guy didn't know. Go to Malachi chapter 3, last book of the Old Testament. This wasn't in my notes, but I'll throw this in for you. This is a freebie. Malachi chapter 4, sorry, not chapter 3. Malachi 4 verse 5. Everybody found it? Now, if you look at the beginning of this chapter 4, it's speaking of the second coming of Christ. The day comes and God will burn them up, neither leaving root or branch. But verse 5 says this, behold, I will send you who? Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Before the day of judgment. God has promised that Elijah the prophet would come. Now, if you remember when John the Baptist first began to preach, they came to John the Baptist and they said, are you Elijah? Because the Jews are looking for Elijah. They're still looking. That's why they got Elijah's chair, sitting there waiting for Elijah to come. They believe that when Elijah comes, Messiah's on his way. Now, I won't go into all the detail of this, because here's my point. The false prophet will be able to send fire from heaven. The Jews believe that Elijah will come to affirm and attest the ministry and calling of the Messiah, yeah? Before the day of judgment. This false prophet will be able to imitate the ministry of Elijah. And he will be able to say, I'm Elijah, I'm the guy from Malachi chapter 4. And this Antichrist, he's the real Christ. And people say, yeah, I see the fire coming down. Yeah, that's what Elijah did. Do you know anybody in history that can send fire come down from heaven? Now, people can send fire up, but nobody can send it down. And not only that, go back to Revelation 13. He not only has power to bring fire down from heaven, he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he has power to do in the sight of the beast. He not only will be able to bring fire down from heaven, this false prophet, but he'll be able to do many other miracles as well. Now, can you name me people who did miracles in the Old Testament? Who are the big players on the market, if you use such a term? Moses and Elijah. And of course, Elisha followed in his footsteps. But Moses and Elijah, those are the guys who saw the most miracles in their ministry. So this false prophet, he'll be able to bring fire down from heaven. He'll be able to do miracles. Now, earlier I said, two names I drew to your attention, Moses. Because there is a promise in the book of Deuteronomy, God shall send that prophet like unto Moses. Do you remember it? So the false prophet will be able to say, I am like Moses, I can do the miracles. I am like Elijah, I can do the miracles. I am like those two. I am the fulfillment of those prophecies of the Old Testament. And many Jews will be persuaded. They'll say, yeah, I've got to say, he can do it. This false prophet he's not the Messiah. He admits he's not the Messiah, but he definitely sounds like Elijah and Moses, and I don't know anybody else who fits that criteria in all of Jewish history. Remember, for 2,000 years now, the Jews have seen nobody in their midst who can do signs and wonders and miracles like this, since Jesus Christ and the apostles were taken out of this earth. They haven't seen anybody who can do these things. And suddenly this false prophet will appear, and he'll be able to do these amazing miracles. The unbelieving world is what? Governed not by faith, but by what? By sight. They'll be impressed. It will be a very impressive miracle show by the false prophet. Now, some people say these are not real miracles, these are optical illusions, these are robotics and things like this. 2 Thessalonians does say that the Antichrist will use lying wonders. Some of them will be optical illusions. Some of them will not be real miracles. But the language in Revelation 13 does not imply to me that these are fake miracles. This is not Benny Hinn, okay? Or anybody like him. These two individuals seem to have real power. And we do have an example in the book of Job, where Satan is able to what? Send fire from heaven. You remember? Job chapter 1, to destroy the animals and servants of Job. We do have that written. And who is empowering the Antichrist and the false prophet? The devil. Who's possessing them? The devil. So I don't think it's an inconceivable leap of logic to think that this Antichrist and this false prophet are able to do real miracles. I don't think it's an unreasonable conclusion at all. There may be some deceptions within it. There may be optical illusions and things like that mixed in with it. But I think my personal view is these are going to be real. These are really the real fullness of the power of the devil has exemplified in these men.
Can I ask a question? So what is Job with the two witnesses in Revelation 11?
Yeah, it's a good point. I want to talk about that as well. The other two witnesses, you remember in Revelation chapter 11, and we said that they could be Moses and Elijah, or Enoch and Elijah. And one of the things that verified them as being authentic was the miracles and the fire coming down. So again, you could see what the false prophet, they're dead now, these two witnesses. You can see what the false prophet would be saying. He'd be saying, they both died. We overcome them. And actually, I can do real miracles. I can do what they've done. So I'm the real Elijah. I'm the real Moses. Okay? Now, let's just move on a little further because I want to try and finish this today. He deceives them in verse 14 by the miracles he does, and says to them on the earth that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. So this false prophet promotes idolatry. He promotes them making an image of the Antichrist, because the Antichrist can't be everywhere. Okay? I know that's not the best drawing, but you get the idea. Now that reminds us of someone, doesn't it? In the Bible. Who made an image? Nebuchadnezzar. Who was an absolute dictator? Nebuchadnezzar. The Antichrist, we're told, will be like the Babylonians, one of his titles. Not just the leopard, but the bear and the lion. He's all those empires consummated in his character, all the ruthlessness and the cruelty and the efficiency. So in Nebuchadnezzar, in Daniel chapter 3, I believe it is, you get an embryonic form, a prototype of what the Antichrist will do. He will build an image to himself all around the world, and he'll demand that everybody worship that image. There's another prototype of it in the Roman Empire. Because all around the Roman Empire they built images of Caesar, and everybody had to take a pinch of incense and shout, "Caesar is Lord!" All over the empire, every town, every village had to do this at the altar of Caesar. And only the Christians said, "No, Jesus is Lord." And in the end of the first century, many Christians were martyred, if you remember, at that time, because they refused to say, "Caesar is Lord. Worship him and him only." Now, the false prophet will have this image constructed all around, and everybody has to worship the image. Just like Nebuchadnezzar, you turn or burn. You bow or you burn. Your choice. Because it says at the end of verse 15, "And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed." So there's death or bowing. That's going to be the choice. It's going to be Nebuchadnezzar Mark II. But what's going to be different from Nebuchadnezzar is this false prophet will be able to make the image appear real. We're told that the image will be able to speak as if it's the real Antichrist. Now, it's not hard for people to do that today. You notice he's got these cartoons that they can appear lifelike, and robots can appear to be almost human-like. I don't know if the Antichrist, the false prophet, will have a power to actually make the image look like a human, or whether he uses robotics and all kinds of other techniques to try and fool people into thinking that the image is human. Whatever. We just don't know. But somehow he manages to make these images appear lifelike. And then we come to this interesting part, in the last section, verse 16. "And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads." Now, what is this mark? The Greek word that's translated mark is a word that's used for when people had a tattoo. If you were a slave, you got a tattoo of your master's name or who you belonged to. That was the mark. It was the same Greek word that was used to put the mark of the image of Caesar on the Roman coins. It's the same Greek word. It's also the same Greek word that's used for these religious cults in the ancient world where they worship a particular god, and those who were adherents to that religion would take a mark. Sometimes you see people today, certain religions, they put marks on their heads or they put marks on their arms to say, "I belong to this religion, I follow this prophet, this guru." We just don't know. It's a little bit ambiguous here. It just says that they will take a mark. Some people think it was a microchip. It could be. Could be. We just, as I say, we just don't have enough information. But this is what we do know. They take it in their right hand or in their foreheads. The right hand is really a symbol of your power, isn't it? That's where the power of a person is. And of course, the forehead's the symbol of the mind. What controls the mind? You're under that control. And verse 17 says, and incidentally, just to throw this out in passing, I don't think the rise in tattooing that you see nowadays all around the world is coincidental. Okay? It's not coincidental. Suddenly it's become very popular. Have you noticed in these last times with the rise of Sodom, the interdependence of the economies of the world, the collapse of many world economies, and this confusion, the rise of ISIS, the turmoil in the Middle East, and suddenly all this immorality along with these tattoos is all being tied in. You see it? It wouldn't be hard for the Antichrist to get people to take tattoos. Would not be hard in the least. And says, "No man might buy or sell," verse 17, "save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name." So, it's going to be a precondition For you to survive in the Great Tribulation period, you're going to have this mark. Okay? Now, in Singapore, we have what? IC cards. I'm not comparing it to the mark. I'm just saying, you can't buy certain things in Singapore unless you do what? Show your IC. When you go to do a Singtel contract, say, show me your IC. In fact, they drive you nuts, don't they? You sign 400 pages, and then each section, show me your IC, show me your IC, show me your IC, show me your IC. Well, in an analogous way, that's what's going to happen with the Antichrist. You're not going to be able to buy even food unless you have that mark. Water, unless you have the mark. Now remember this. We've already discovered from the other chapters in the book of Revelation that this point in the tribulation period, there's going to be all these famines, earthquakes, the shipping trade routes are all going to be destroyed. The vegetation is going to be burned up on the earth. There's going to be terrible deprivation. No doubt there's no oil to power most of the cars or the airplanes. I mean, this is maybe not even much electricity. This is going to be a terrible time. People are really going to be panicking for their lives. And then you're told, unless you have the mark, you die. Unless you have the mark, you can't trade. You starve to death, even if you don't physically die. Remember the advice of the old devil from Job chapter 2? Skin for skin. A man will give everything for his life. And they will. They'll take the mark. Even those countries and those individuals that are very proud and say, oh, no, I will not be ruled by anybody. You just watch. They'll take the mark if they're desperate enough. I remember years ago when I was at school, we had this guy came in to speak to us who had fought in the Second World War. He was a prisoner under the Japanese. He was a British soldier, was imprisoned by the Japanese. And he was at Hiroshima, where the bomb fell. He was in a camp nearby. And he actually survived many, many years. He didn't die of any radiation or anything like that. And he told us that when he went to this camp, initially they served him this horrible food, snails in it and all kinds of things, this horrible porridge or gruel soup. And he said, whoa. And he put it away, he threw it away. He passed it to someone else. The first day. He said the second day, he ate some. The third day, he ate the whole bowl. And the fourth day, he asked for seconds. Now, what's my point? The point is this. When you're desperate, when you're starving, you'll really do things you wouldn't think you would ever do. People give up a lot when they're starving for food. And this Antichrist, he will have a grip on the hearts of people and on the natural desires of people like you've never seen. Let me close this. Here is wisdom, verse 18 says, let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. 6, 6, 6. Now, we don't have to guess what the number means because we're told. Look what it says. It is the number of a man. Now, why is 6 the number of man? Because who was created on the 6th day? Man was. Okay? Adam was created on the 6th day of creation. It is a number associated with man. Okay? So 666, when the Bible puts a number or a phrase together, a bit like the phrase holy, holy, holy. The emphasis is what? On the holiness of God. He's holy and he's holy and he's holy. That's why it's repeated 3 times. When you see the number 666, it's saying that the Antichrist will be the consummation, the personification of man, all about man. Man without God, man living in his way. Remember, he's also called the lawless one, the wicked one, the son of perdition. Well, all those terms, demonstrate to you and I, this is man living man's way. This is the man living without God. This is a man living in defiance of God. This is man saying, I can forgive my own sins. I can live my own life. I can live any way I want. 666. That's what the idea behind it is. It's not that the Antichrist you'll suddenly see on Fox News or CNN or Channel News Asia with 666 and say, hi. Okay? It may happen, but I very much doubt it. That's not what it means. It just means that he has that symbolic number, 666, because he is the personification of all of the rebelliousness of mankind, summed up in him. All the hatred of God, all the enmity towards God and towards Jesus Christ, all tied up in him. He's the devil's man, remember this. He's the devil's Messiah. He's sin's man, or the man of sin, is how he's described. Sin's man. 666. That's all it means. Don't get too excited about the term. Okay? We don't know who this person is. Is he on earth today, right now? He could be. He could be. How do we know that he could be? Because all the preconditions are all there now for an Antichrist to come. He could be seen all over the world at once through satellite television, through the internet, for example. The world's in a turmoil. It's perfect for him. And remember from the book of Daniel, he comes through 10 kings first. He doesn't come as one. He becomes as one of the 10, and then he arises from the 10 and takes control of the 10 other rulers. He comes surreptitiously. He comes gently. He comes almost cunningly. I'll say almost. He does come cunningly. Okay? He doesn't just suddenly appear and say, hey, I'm going to rule the world. It's not like that. It's gradual. Now, he does it in a fast way, but he does it in a gradual way. It's incremental. Step by step. One last thing. I said one last thing, but this is the second last thing. I want you to go to page 5 of your notes. Now, I'm not boasting here, but I've read a lot of books on the book of Revelation, on the book of Daniel. Nobody has set out this detail in any of the commentaries I've read. They all set out bits and pieces. Because I've listed to you 8 things that the Antichrist, I believe, from putting together all the strands of evidence throughout the Bible. Now, there may be more. This is not an exhaustive list. There may be more. But these are 8 things that the Antichrist will be able to do to try and fool people, and especially the Jewish people, that he is the real Christ. Number 1, he'll broker peace between the Jews and the Arabs. Hasn't been done before. Since Ishmael and Isaac started fighting 3,000 odd years ago. No peace between the Jew and the Arab. He will do it. Number 2, he will promise prosperity in a time of great economic turmoil. That's another one of his strings to his bow. Number 3, he will patronize the erection of the 3rd Jewish temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. He will either actively build it, or he will strike the agreement to allow them to do it. He'll patronize them, allow them to build that. Number 4, he will appear to fulfill the death, burial, and resurrection of the Messiah as promised in Psalm 22 and Isaiah 53. Number 5, he will construct a world empire by subjugating the Gentile nations with the Jews in a prominent position. So, this is sometimes overlooked. He will build this great empire of all these Gentile nations, but he's going to promise the Jews, you're going to be at the center. Now, that's what Messiah is supposed to do, remember? Number 6, he will verify his messianic claims by doing spectacular signs and wonders. He will be able to do these things, the Antichrist. Number 7, he will be a great prophetic speaker like Moses. Remember, Moses said, your God will send another prophet like unto me. Now, what was Moses famous for? His sermons, his preaching, his prophesying. What's the Antichrist going to be famous for? He's going to be a great talker, the Bible says. speak great words, be very persuasive with his language. Number 8, the Antichrist will have a pseudo-Elijah, a fake Elijah, called the false prophet, who will be able to bring down fire from heaven, who will be able to do signs and wonders like the real Elijah, and promote the Antichrist as the Messiah, according to the prophecy of Malachi chapter 4. Okay? Those are 8 things that we have studied so far that the Antichrist will do in order to try and win the hearts of the Jewish people, and indeed the whole world as well. All right? The good news is this. God only permits him what? This little window. And then God says what? Enough is enough. Remember verse 7, we read it earlier today, Revelation 13. Don't miss the first few words of Revelation 13 verse 7. And it was given. In other words, God permitted it. He didn't take it himself, the Antichrist, the false prophet. Anything they have, any power they have, any time they have, is granted by God and only by God. And when God says time's up, time will be up for the Antichrist and the false prophet. Their destiny and their doom has already been planned in the council of eternity, and it will be fulfilled in exactly the way God says it's going to be fulfilled. So don't get too excited about the 666 guy and the false prophet. They're finished. They're like little sparklers. You know the sparklers the children play with at the festivals? What happens? They sparkle, and then gone. That's the Antichrist and the false prophet. God is the only one who ultimately reigns, not them. Let us pray. Our Father, we thank Thee for Thy word. I thank Thee even for the insights we've gained as we've studied this book of Revelation. Continue to speak to us, illuminate our thoughts and our minds, that we would learn more about Your plans, Your insights to how this world will unfold. Give us the faith and the courage to live for Thee in the darkest of dark days that lie ahead. For we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.